a Sufi story. And like all Sufi stories, it has several dimensions and a hidden or secret essence. Let's see if we can trammel those dimensions and come to glean what it is, the center, the secret that this story can reveal, long though it is. It's the story of a young girl by the name of Roshan. Now, Roshan means clever or bright. And she was born to wealthy parents, but in that time and place, many children were born, but many children died. So Roshan's mother had given birth to several children, but Roshan was the only one who survived. And of course, as such, she was much loved and doted upon. But she grew into a beautiful young girl, and as was the custom in those days, at the age of 14, her parents began to look for a suitable husband for her. So they eventually found a rich young merchant who seemed to have all the qualities that would make a good husband for their beloved child. And so a grand wedding was arranged. It was the custom for the wives to go to their husband's house to live after the marriage. So Roshan found herself in the household of her husband. But fortunately, her mother-in-law, who was a widow, was a very kindly person and guided her in the ways of the household, etc., after she came to live in that abode. And Roshan was quite happy. But one day, her mother-in-law said to her, "I've decided to take a journey to go and visit my brother who lives in a province some distance away. So take good care of your husband while I'm away." So Roshan was quite happy taking care of the affairs of the household while her husband was out doing his trade. But one day she decided that she would not have her usual afternoon sleep, and she went to look in that trousseau that came with her wedding, and she took out the beautiful gifts that had been given to her, the lovely pieces of cloth, the jewelry that had been given by her parents. But as she was doing this, she heard a scraping sound, and she wondered where it was coming from. So she went to investigate. And as she came to the bottom of the stairs, the door quietly opened, and in crept this being. Obviously, he was a thief. He was ragged. He had on his feet felt cloth so that he would not make a sound. So immediately Roshan knew that he was not up to any good. But being the quick-thinking and clever young being that she was, she affronted him and said, "Oh, uncle, I'm so glad to see you. Haven't seen you for so long, since I was small. Come in, come in, come in, come. Let me make you tea. Let me take care of you." Well, of course, the thief was completely flummoxed by this, but what could he do? So he allowed himself to be led into the sitting room, where Roshan sat him down and made sweet tea for him, and then brought a bowl of hot water to wash his feet and his hands, and then painstakingly painted his hands with henna, as was the gracious custom. So the thief, of course, when he got over his distress at being greeted in this way, he started to relax and enjoy it a little bit. Because she said, "Oh, uncle, let me go and fix sweetmeats for you." So she went to the kitchen and she made delicious pilaf for him and brought it to him. He sat down and ate a wonderful meal. And then she gave him the hubble-bubble pipe. Well, of course, after this wonderful meal and this care, he started to nod off to sleep. And as he did, Roshan took the chance. She quickly crept out and went straight to her neighbor's house and brought them back. And of course, they gave the thief a great beating and threw him out the door. Now, Roshan didn't mention anything about this little adventure, except, of course, the neighbors knew. But the thief was angry. How could this little minx, this little bit of a girl, foil him in this way? So he decided he would plan revenge. So time passed a little bit and all was well for some time. But then one day, Roshan and her mother-in-law were preparing the evening meal when there was a knock on the door. "Who could that be at this time of day?" said the mother-in-law. But when they went to the door, there were two hefty men carrying 3 casks, 3 chests. And they said, "Oh, I've been sent by Ali Baba, your friend, and he's leaving town and he wants you to take care of his wealth while you're away." Well, somehow Roshan suspected that this was not all that it appeared to be, but her mother-in-law immediately said, yes, bring them in and put them where we keep our own treasure chests. But when Roshan's mother-in-law went out of the room, she checked, and she saw that 2 of the chests were padlocked and one had no lock on it. So immediately she went to find a hefty lock and she locked the other one. Well, of course, you know what the plan was. There was a man in each of those chests. And the plan was, in the middle of the night, that the one who was in the open chest would come out, release the other 2. They would steal everything in the house and make their escape. But Roshan, suspecting, in the night when her mother-in-law and husband were fast asleep, she went to the kitchen and boiled some oil. And she brought it back, and in the apertures that were there for them to breathe, that were slightly hidden, she poured the hot oil. Well, of course, the 3 men were screeching in pain and agony. So she opened up the chests, and in their states of distress she dragged them outside the front door and then quietly went back to lay herself beside her husband. In the morning, of course, when she got up and looked out the front door, they'd crawled off into the night, hadn't they, licking their wounds. Well, you can imagine, the thief was beside himself with anger, that his plot had been foiled again. Now you know what thieves are like. They have a lot of pride, and he could not have this bit of a flibbity-gibbet continue like this. What would his reputation be in town? So he pondered on this, and time passed. As time was, Roshan's husband was elevated in his position to a state where he was eligible to go for the Hajj. So he had to leave his family and go off, leaving his wife in the care of his mother. But dreadful thing happened. It came back to their notice that en route to that great place where the Hajj is held, the ship foundered and sank with her husband on board. So Roshan was a widow. For 40 days she mourned him, wearing the black that was required of a widow. And of course, this came to the ears of the thief. And when a woman becomes a widow, she leaves her husband's house and returns to her family home. And this Roshan did. And of course, she was welcomed back into her parents' household. And by this time, she was now a young woman of about 20 years old. And so after the consummate time of mourning, she was to find another husband. But the thief had other plans. So the thief went to an old crone, an old hag, who was known a little bit for her witchery as well as being a matchmaker. So the thief offered the old hag a lot of money to fulfill a little plot that he has, because by this time he had become very rich on his ne'er-do-well activities. But the old crone really had other plans, because Roshan, being young and beautiful, even though it was considered as a widow she was tainted goods, intended to make a lot of money by matchmaking and finding another husband for her. So the thief had to offer quite a considerable amount of money to get her to fulfill his plot. So finally, with this large sum in front of her, she agreed, but she said, it's going to take me some time. So what happened was that the old crone found herself a house right next door to Roshan's parents, and she went to introduce herself and ingratiate herself to Roshan's mother, pretending to be a pious old being, spending all her time in prayer and at the mosque. So day after day the old crone would come to the house, and she would tell of her piety, her experiences, and of course Roshan's mother was quite taken with this. So after some time, Roshan's mother, who was now a widow herself, came to Roshan and said, "I'm going on a journey. I want to visit my relatives in a far-off place. I leave you in care of the house." So this was the old crone's opportunity. A few days later, she came over to the house and she said to Roshan, "You were out shopping, and I got a message from your mother to say that she wants you to prepare immediately to go to your cousin's wedding." Well, Roshan couldn't remember a cousin who was of marriageable age, so she was a little bit suspicious of what was going on, because from the very beginning she had doubted the piety of this old woman. But what could she do? She was also a very dutiful daughter, and when it was a message from her mother, she had to respond. So she went outside the door, and there was horses a lovely white mare and a horse for the old woman who was to lead her. And off they galloped. Well, they went a great distance, and Roshan was saying, "How far is it? I didn't realize my relative's house was so far away." "No, not far," said the old woman. And very soon they came to a very palatial residence. But it was very quiet. There was no one there, and Roshan was thinking, well, where is the festivity? Where are the wedding preparations? What's going on here? But she followed the old crone into the house, which was filled with beautiful, beautiful artifacts, but there was no one there. And suddenly, as Roshan looked around, she heard the door quietly being closed, and found that she was captured. The house was locked. Of course, the thief was hiding not far away, and he prepared his dagger because he intended that he was going to kill this little vixen. Roshan looked around. Where was there some escape? And she saw a skylight. So she was able to gather some of the furniture together and climb and break open to make her escape. So she climbed out of the skylight and found the horse tethered where it had been left outside, and quickly she galloped away. Of course, when the thief came in and could not find her, he called out for the old crone, and she swore that she had locked the door and ensured that Roshan was captured. So they looked around and finally looked up to see where Roshan had escaped. You can imagine the thief's anger and fury at being foiled yet again. Roshan didn't mention anything of this adventure again, but the thief, not to be deterred, decided that he would become an honest man. So, dyeing his beard, cutting his locks, and dressing himself in the finery of the day, he opened a goldsmith shop and became a well-known and respected member of the society of that place. Now, one day, Roshan and her mother were out in the town shopping, where they saw this facade, bright jewelry in the window, and they decided to investigate. But as soon as they walked in the door, Roshan caught sight of the thief and recognized him immediately. Now she thought, this is a ploy. What shall I do? But she kept quiet. She did not give any indication that she recognized him. Now, when they went back home, after she had said that she was going to come back to the shop and buy some gifts for her relatives, the thief went to another matchmaker and sent her to be an intermediary to Roshan's mother, to seek the hand of Roshan in marriage. Now, because Roshan was young and beautiful, even though she was tainted goods, not a virgin, as was required in those days, had had several offers of marriage in between times, but she'd refused them. And Roshan's mother was a little bit chagrined about this. So when the offer came from the thief, she said to Roshan, "This is your third chance. You are tainted goods. You must marry this man." So what could Roshan do? She was a dutiful daughter. And so she prepared her trousseau. But along with her trousseau, she got a goat skin, and she filled it with molasses and sweet fruit juices. And then she made wax arms and legs, and she had an effigy made. She had a dress, the same as her wedding dress, prepared. And when she left to go to the thief's house, she carried this along with her trousseau. And, unbeknownst to anyone, she went into the bridal chamber and set up her goatskin, dressed beautifully, veiled. And then she went out to have the wedding ceremony. It was a grand affair. The thief had not spent anything but the most that he could afford on the accoutrements and the feast. But his friends said they had never seen a man who was so excited about getting married. So after the wedding ceremonies, when everyone had congratulated the couple, wished them the best in their nuptials, and left, Roshan went into the wedding chamber and hid herself behind a screen. Her husband, the thief, came in, and seeing the figure lying on the bridal bed, so beautiful, resplendent in her gown, with her veil, he gloated, "At last, I've got you exactly where I want you, and revenge is sweet." And he took out his dagger, and he lunged and stabbed the figure on the bridal bed. Blood flowed, and to fulfill his revenge, he took a cup and drank the blood. Oh, the nectar of the gods. He had never tasted anything so sweet. And just as the effigy fell as though dead, he fell across the effigy. "What have I done? My beloved Roshan, I've loved you from the beginning. What have I done?" And with that he turned his dagger and was about to stab his own heart, when a voice behind the screen, as she emerged, said, "What? Are you going to make me a widow for a second time?" He fell at her feet, begging forgiveness. He said, "I've loved you from the moment I set eyes on you, but how could I as a lowly thief, be worthy of you. And with that, they fell into each other's arms, made passionate love for the whole night, lived long lives, and had many children. Sufi stories and their dimensions, their levels, and their essence, their secret core. What is it that arises for you out of this story? Recognizing, as we do, quite clearly its levels, the levels on which it can be understood with our mind. And in this state that we call Satchitananda, have the ability and the possibility of gleaning, becoming aware of, deep, deep in ourselves, what its secret is, what its essence is. But in the first instance, what is it that arises for you as an awareness, off the top of the head, so to speak, as to what it means? What is it that's occurred for us along this spiritual path we've traversed, of necessity to reach all of those three levels, for them to merge the nitty-gritty, the world of duality, opposites, male, female, subjectivity, objectivity, cause and effect, and that dream world, that phase when we discovered our inner abilities, our healing qualities, the ability to interpret our own dreams and the dreams of others. And that level where we experience the oneness with everything, the empathy, the compassion, the love. And then there's the secret, the core. What's your understanding? What arises for you?
Love was always there.
Love was always there.
Behind
Yes.
anger, badness.
Yes. 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 The thread. Mm-hmm.
And for me, my thing was accepting and, like embracing all different levels of who I am.
Yes. That's right. And we did have that coming together, really, didn't we? There is an experience of it. No longer, when the war stops inside, when the battle between these two ceases. What could be this secret essence, though? What is it that all of these stories contain, couched in whatever way? What is our secret? Our secret. What is it that now you find you have no words to express? What is it that arises in us that we would long to share, and yet we cannot? No words suffice.
It's because transmutation happened from stillness, so there's no witness.
That's right. And yet we can recognize that these stories do have that secret contained within them, and in their expression give out of that secret. Isn't that so? Isn't it so then with us? Even though this secret is inexpressible, every story, every word we speak, every action we undertake contains that secret. Can it be otherwise? It cannot. It cannot be otherwise. But we have to know that secret ourselves. Isn't it so? We have to know that secret ourselves. Even though it remains in our being with a longing from time to time, if only it could be. It's there in everything we say and do. Thank you, thank you.